Welcome to the 615 Sessions podcast on this Friday, week 18. We made it mercifully. Nick Sussop, Tennessean, is here. It's always a great pleasure to be joined by our friend. It is a great pleasure for the podcast to be presented by Zen Sports. Promo code ATOZTN is how you get involved, brother. I don't know if we made it because it's not like this ends on Sunday when the season mercifully comes to an end. Because there are a great many questions that this team has to figure out, but at least the bad football part will be over.
Yeah, I like to say we made it through scathed.
Honestly, and Nick, Lucas had to back me off the other day because he goes, you have to stop talking about them like it's only happening to you. Which I thought was really funny and also 100% so. I have taken this season, how bad they are at football, Nick, this year, so personally that my tone has not been the best at times. But fun times are ahead because the offseason only means bright, shiny new things, right? Like we're going to all have fun again like we did last summer.
Yeah, I mean, not to spoil anything that you could see on the Tennessean later, but I am putting together my off-season list right now. I am building a manifesto. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous time. But yeah, I mean, your point reminds me of something a good friend of mine told me in college one time, where I'd be going on these rants about like, man, this would only happen to me. I can't believe this happened. It only happened to me. And he said, no, Nick, this happens to everybody. You're just the only one neurotic enough to notice. Just calm down. Everybody is scared all the time. Yeah. And that's the life of watching the Tennessee Titans, right?
Well, fear would honestly be welcome because at least I would feel some emotion about them other than like disgust on a regular basis. But they have to do everything in their power to lose this game. And I don't know if the injury report is indicative of that. I don't know if starting Will Levis is indicative of that for the first time in 3 weeks. The vibes have been interesting all year long, but this game puts them in a particular bind. Of course, they can't cop to losing a game as players and coaches, but there is not a single damn good reason for them to go out there and win a game on Sunday. It would be as catastrophic as this year has been. It would be catastrophic even further. It would be turned up to 10 if they found a way to fumble out of the second or potentially first overall pick and end up in this 4-13 slog that so many teams are and potentially pick like 7th or 8th again.
Yeah, I wrote about this today because I've been thinking about it just nonstop. These coaches and these players love to talk about how progress isn't linear. I'm sure you're sick of hearing that quote. Linear. Football is linear. Like it's one of the most linear things in the world. It starts in week 1 with 0-0-0 or with 15 on the clock, and then it keeps progressing forward. The fact that this game matters is a product of linearity. If they had won the Bears game or the Jets game or any of these fluke one-score games that they were a turnover away, like they like to say, we wouldn't be able to have any of these discussions. They are purely in this situation because they have linearly led to a point where this game has to matter. And so I'm at a point where whatever happens, I want to look at it in the totality. I want to get to a point where we're talking about the season as a discrete 17-game sample. But we're mired in this situation where we have to talk about the one game because we don't know the end result yet. When they win or when they lose, whatever happens, you move on and you say, this is the sample. But for now, we have to pretend this weird investment of, this matters because it's the only thing. No, it's a product of the 16 that came before it and put us in this very strange situation. Yeah.
Somebody says in the comment section, so we're saying the Titans are playing meaningful football in January. That's right, kids. That's exactly what
what I'm saying. If you want me to quote Albert Camus, as I'm often want to do, meaning is derived by what you decide matters. In a world where there might be no meaning, everything is meaningful.
God knows if you wanted to describe this Titan season as anything meaningful would probably rank low on the list at this point in time. But to your point about, progress not necessarily being linear, but plenty of things in football being linear, because I'm willing to accept that, like, it's not like a Madden rating. You don't play a season and get to improve your players' points system or or however those things are graded. You don't get to, cycle up their speed or their strength or all these other things, their tackling ability. That doesn't happen the way that I think a lot of people assume that it should happen. But the thing for me, Nick, and I so appreciate your perspective for a variety of reasons, but I appreciate your perspective because I am overreactive and you are famously not.
Very underreactive, yeah.
I think that there are a great many overreactions that have been made about this particular season. I would like for you to tell me what the most fair overreaction is and what you consider to be the most out of pocket, the way that you've seen this thing now cycle. We're in week 18. We've made it to the finish line, theoretically. But from your perspective, what kind of fits those categories? Because I'm all over the place with this shit.
There is no way to say this that doesn't sound like I'm stumping for one camp or the other. So I'm just going to say it as directly as possible with no agenda. I think that the biggest overreaction has been comparing the foibles of 2024 to the foibles of 2023. So if we are talking about what are the things that went wrong in 2023 versus what are the things that went wrong this year, we're talking about, was it an overreaction or was it overspending to sign Calvin Ridley to this big of a deal? Should they have given up as much as they did for L'Jarius Sneed? Was it the right decision to pick Sweat in the second round when you had bigger needs elsewhere on the field? These are regular football second guesses. These are hindsight questions of they made a defensible decision and then it didn't necessarily work out the way they wanted it to. Go back 12 months ago, we were talking about like, hey, why are you floating trade rumors about Derrick Henry? We're talking about what's going on with this Kevin Byard contract situation. Why is this being legislated in the court of public opinion when you expressly said you're not going to do that? Mm-hmm. I think when you look at what we've overreacted to, it's putting second-guessing logical decisions opposite questions of general competency. I do not necessarily see, again, from an underreactor's perspective, a lack of general competency on the Tennessee Titans right now. I see a team that made decisions that we all applauded in March and we all applauded in April, and they haven't worked out. That is broadly different from making decisions that nobody applauded that didn't work out. So as we kind of discuss and debrief what happened in 2024 heading into 2025, we do have to acknowledge that everybody was wrong. We all thought this was going to lead to something. I've said this on this show before. I felt like a jerk because I thought the Titans were going to go 6-11. And everybody else was picking 7, 8, 9.
What kind of assholes are we?
Yeah, like I was such a jerk. So I'm like, I'm on the low end of the beat. Nobody else thought they'd win 5 or 6 games like me. What am I missing? Because we all bought in. These were good ideas. And I stand by the fact these probably were good ideas. Going out and getting the best wide receiver on the market and the best cornerback who changed teams this offseason and the best center who changed teams this offseason and the biggest left tackle and the biggest defensive tackle in the draft, and going out and getting these things that functionally fit what you're trying to do while also improving the quality of your roster. Those are sound decisions. We shouldn't be questioning competency here. These are hindsight decisions, which is such a different problem than what was the plan last year. I understand the plan this year. It didn't work. And that's a really long answer. I'm sorry to rant, but like that's to me the overreaction.
No, and I think that's fair because I've talked about this in a variety of different ways, and I definitely have questioned that. I did question the competency on a regular basis, specifically with the coaching staff, because of how often this team is penalized, is just completely out of sorts and unable to, once they get themselves in a hole that they so often create for themselves, they are completely and totally incapable of digging themselves out. And I did make that a question of competency from my standpoint. And, we all talk to people around the building and around the situation. Like there are dissenting opinions about who's competent and who's not that are coming from inside, no matter what's in a Jeremy Fowler report that paints it very, very picturesque on a 3-13 football team about, again, how great everybody gets along. It said everything but collaboration in that thing. And I'm I'm not shitting on Fowler. Like I'm sure Jeremy Fowler got that from a completely credible person within the organization. I just thought that line was that graph was bullshit based on what we all know is going on inside there, which is everybody's miserable.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you be? It's 3-13. And to your point, they had a plan and it didn't work. It didn't work by any stretch of the imagination. And also, the thing that was the biggest variable here, even though Vols fans will tell you that they told you from the start that Will Levis was going to do this, I did not anticipate. And you and I have had this conversation before on the podcast about, what Will Levis has been, what is Will Levis doing, what has he done, and why is it different from what he had done this season? Because there were some significant differences in who this player was. But I could never have envisioned one single player just putting them in so many bad positions as often as Will did, and how much more of an impact that had than any other thing that happened on the roster this year.
Oh, I agree. I think that we don't like to talk about luck because luck is this catch-all term that means uncontrollable. But just like, I looked this up probably about 2 weeks ago. I think it's 20 teams. It might be in this notebook, actually. I think it's 20 teams, since 2013 that have given up 2 or more turnovers a game, which is the ratio the Titans are at. Of those 20 teams, 19 of them dropped their turnover rate the next year. I believe 17 of them dropped their total number of turnovers by 10 or more. Like, turnover luck in the NFL is famously volatile. But of these 20 teams, it has to be acknowledged that 18 of them either changed head coaches, changed quarterbacks, or both the next offseason. The only teams that ran it back and just said, I don't know what's going to happen, were a team that had Tom Coughlin and Eli Manning. So, a Super Bowl winning duo. And then Josh Allen's first year in Buffalo. So they were just breaking in McDermott and Allen, and it worked out. Every other time, teams got better by either changing the quarterback or changing the philosophy. That's the position the Titans are in right now. We have to fully acknowledge that what happened this year is incredibly statistically likely to not happen again.
Yeah.
Because turnovers, the only team out of these 20 that turned the ball over more the next year was the Buccaneers with Jameis Winston's 30-30 season. Barring you go and sign Jameis Winston as your quarterback, which feasibly is an option, but barring that happening, the Titans are incredibly statistically likely to not have the same issue. And that probably means, like the guy or dislike the guy, Will is going to be the fall guy. Yeah. And you go out and you get a new quarterback who is less inclined to turn the ball over. If we're saying this team was turnovers away, they're probably not going to turn the ball over as much again next year. And that puts you in a position where you got to feel good, right? But you're also basing this on the statistics of trends, and the Titans can buck trends as much as they want because that's what the Titans tend to do.
Brother, I mean, it is, and it's completely sound and reasonable logic to look at that and say, well, so often, and Nick, I know that you know this better than most, even if you haven't been on the beat the entire time, like this franchise plenty.
I do, yeah.
At this point, anytime I think, and it's like luck, right? There's no way for me to quantify this feeling that I have about them. But anytime that I think that they can't do something any worse, they do something catastrophic and give Andre Dillard a 3-year deal after I've just watched Dennis Daly play left tackle for a season. Like it is so unthinkable that they would find themselves in these positions, and yet they continue to create some of these positions for themselves that I can't. I'm going to go in with whatever happens, whether they bring it all back, whether they, trade Will off, whether they, fire one but keep the other in terms of the front office and the head coach. I think we're all under the impression that while Callahan is probably the more sure-footed of the two at this point, there's more likely than not that this thing is back in 2025. Though I maintain that Ran Carthon's situation is a bit more up in the air than anybody else in a decision-making role at this point in time. I am just so upset with myself for buying off on the decisions that they made and I think that's why I have had the tone that I've had about them this year, that I'm going in without a level of trust on this thing, no matter what the statistical trends tell me should happen, because they're the damn Tennessee Titans and they don't care about statistical trends.
It's the metaphor I've used all year is like, again, not a defense or a knock on the Vrabel era, but when the Titans were in the Vrabel era, they were playing a different game than everybody else, just about everybody else. There were probably 2-3 teams in the NFL that were built the way the Titans were and that were trying to build the way the Titans were. It's the equivalent of playing a triple option offense in college. You're going to be a novelty that's harder to prepare for because you're doing something that nobody has to prepare for on a week in, week out basis. The Brian Callahan era Titans are one of 27 teams trying to build in this modern fluid offense, Shanahan McVay style, use a multiple defense that comes from a tree of the Harbaugh's type defense. Like everybody is doing what the Titans are doing. And of the 27, they're probably 25th, 26th at it right now. So if you go from being the best or second best at a thing nobody does to being bottom of the barrel at a thing everybody's doing, the force multiplier is going to make it even harder to be good at what you're trying to do because teams know how to prepare for what you're trying to do. And now that's a lot of fancy words of saying having Derrick Henry in his prime was a cheat code.
Yeah.
And not having Derrick Henry is not a cheat code. So sometimes we over intellectualize this, and that's the difference between those years and this. But I don't know. I think that when we talk about, the Titans are finding new ways to create misery, I think the new way to create misery has just been they are modernizing, which means playing catch up, which means doing stuff that every other team knows how to counter.
Yeah, which, should have been, again, revisionist, but should have been taken into account when they set this vision or laid this vision that they had out, when it wasn't, necessarily anything revolutionary. It's just revolutionary to them based on what they have been. Basically, their entire existence in Tennessee, their DNA is wired to run the football with great running backs and play solid defense and white knuckle your way to a win or a one-score loss. Like that's just who they've been the entire time, no matter who the coach is.
I was rereading something I wrote earlier in the year, and it struck me as funny to remind myself of this. If you talk about very literal 10-year cycles, in 2004, the Titans moved on from Eddie George. In 2014, the Titans moved on from Chris Johnson, and in 2024, the Titans moved on from Derrick Henry. The Chris Johnson year and the Derrick Henry year were both products of hiring new head coaches who were trying to modernize the offense to be more pass first. And famously, neither situation worked. I think you could make a very solid argument that 2014 and 2024 are the two most miserable years of Tennessee Titans football.
14 for sure worse, but this is right down there.
I think it's a second place just ahead of 2005. Yeah. But when you put all of that into like the historical bent of what happens when this team has to move on from a running back who was the franchise's identity for a half decade? Obviously, it's going to be a strange adjustment. It makes sense that a team that pretty much based its entire game plan around one guy who's impossible to tackle would not be built to adjust just by bringing in 5 or 6 new starters on offense. That said, I don't think that building around a generational running back is necessarily the best way to win in the National Football League. The last time a player won a Super Bowl while ranked as a top 5 rusher in the NFL by yardage was Corey Dillon in 2004. It has been 20 years since a top 5 leading rusher in the NFL won a Super Bowl. And you can point out Marshawn Lynch won a Super Bowl. He was really good. There are good running backs that win. Christian McCaffrey's been to the Super Bowl last year. I mean, it's not impossible to win built around a running back, but let's not lose sight of the fact that, the Titans were built that way for 25 years. Titans haven't really achieved that much. They've had a lot of really good running backs. They haven't won Super Bowls. They haven't been to a Super Bowl in 25 years. So they are making a sound, logical decision by trying to win the way that other teams win. The issue is that other teams are winning.
Yeah. The thing that also stands out to me is just how this season, and it may just be an anomaly based on this season and the Eagles getting the 99th percentile season out of Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry going to the perfect possible fit to complement his talents. And you've seen teams, I would argue, run the ball at a much higher frequency this season in some form or fashion. I'm sure that I'm sure it probably balances out depending on game situation and things like that. But we have seen a lot of volume running this year in the NFL from at least two teams who have done it with significant success. But of course, those teams aren't built around solely the running back the way that you're talking about. Saquon Barkley has A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Yeah. Derrick Henry has Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers and Lamar Jackson, who should be arguably, we don't have to get into MVP stuff because as far as I know, neither of us have a vote, but like Lamar Jackson may well be a 3-time MVP by the time the season is done. I would agree with that assessment at this point in time. I'm so fascinated to see what they do because all of this stuff can be broken down and discussed and rationalized or, processed however you want to process it. And the thing that none of us know is what the hell Amy Adams Strunk is going to do. Because for all the different quantifiable things about this, she is the most unquantifiable property that they have. And honestly, I'm just so curious to see who in that building still has the ability to kind of provide her with constructive criticism since Steve Underwood's been gone. Because I don't know if that person exists anymore. And she may just decide to change things up for the sake of changing things up, because that's basically what she did in the last month of the season last year.
Yeah. Well said. I don't know what's going to happen. None of us know what's going to happen.
Really doesn't seem like anybody knows what the hell they're going to do.
I believe that there is a good enough belief that this year was supposed to be hard. Like, I don't think that enough people were caught off guard by it. That means pure hysteria and panic if it's 3-14. This is definitely the low end of what was expected. But I think that even the most realistic observers, or the least realistic observers of this team, didn't expect this to be a playoff team. This was supposed to be a figure it out year. And if it's true that you learn more from losing than you do from winning, there's an awful lot to figure out.
That's just a line that we keep hearing. I don't know if they're just saying it to say things like Jeff Simmons in the hangover from success in Washington, or Jarvis Brownlee saying he thinks the cold got the guys, because you're just talking in circles, because as professional athletes, they don't know they don't know what on earth to make of this situation either. And I think they've been put in some tough spots this year, having to answer questions about it. Of course, you want sound logic and reason. Of course, fans want a level of transparency that they're never going to provide you, or should they? It doesn't benefit them at all. But it's I will say that it has been interesting. Seems too kind of a word for them, because they were not interesting other than the moments where they were catastrophically bad. But I am fascinated to see what they do moving forward, and I'm just generally curious, but to know what. Black Monday is pretty cut and dry for most places in the NFL. And here we're all just looking around, throwing our hands up, waiting to get a phone call or a text, or see somebody put it out there before any of us are quite dialed into what's going on. But certainly to lose the game on Sunday is at the forefront of everybody's minds but the football team. And even the football team knows what's going on there, because that's all the questions that we keep asking them about.
Yeah. I do not think that enough talk has been given to the fact that there are 23 guys on the 53 who don't have contracts after March. Why should any of these guys care about what the Titans have next year? Yep. Many of these teams' starting contributors aren't locked in for 2025. So why should they be like, oh, we got to do what's good for the future of the franchise? This isn't about, oh, the players are being petulant. They're just trying to win because they don't want to lose. They're trying to play individual good football, because they're probably not going to be Titans next year. You have guys like Jarvis Brownlee, guys who like T'Vondre Sweat, who are going to be Titans next year. And you feel like, yeah, let them lose to benefit later. But why the heck should somebody like Dylan Radins, for example, who's on an audition game, somebody like Daryl Baker, who signed as, I think he's a restricted free agent, equal rights free agent next year, maybe. Just one of those guys that's like, yeah, you picked me up in training camp. I've played a lot of football. Like, these guys, they have no reason to care what the future of the Tennessee Titans is like until they are signed to a future contract if they want one. Yeah. So I don't know. The reason these guys aren't thinking about tanking is because that's not the way that they're wired. Like, they have to think about what's next for them.
Tennessean.com is where you can read our good buddy Nick Suss of the Tennessean. You can follow him on Twitter at Nick Suss. We'll be there on Sunday, even if you all aren't. So we'll let you know what happens, or if you're sicko enough to be out there, make sure you dress warm, buddy. I appreciate your time as always, and we'll play it out on Sunday, I guess.
Yeah, bring your